Hi everyone, I'm FlygonHG, and this is the video of my attempts at a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokémon White 2, where my encounters are determined by the Pokémon that I catch in Pokémon Go. I recently went on vacation for the first time in like 3 years, and I figured that there was no better way to celebrate this much needed vacation than by milking some sweet content out of it. Every city I went to, I caught the first Pokémon I found when I opened up Pokémon Go. And using the power of having an uncle that works at Nintendo, these little pocket monsters were transferred to my very real cartridge of Pokémon White 2. I chose White 2 because the game is broken into 3 relatively discrete segments that will represent the 3 portions of my vacation, such that my encounters will be distributed throughout my playthrough. In total, there were only 8 encounters though, so this was pretty tough. The rules for this playthrough can be found in the description below, but in short, in addition to standard Nuzlocke rules, there's no using items in battle, no leveling up past the next gym leader's ace before the start of the battle, and we're playing on set mode. Oh, and for the first time ever, I'm playing White 2 on challenge mode, meaning that most major battles have stronger and larger teams as well as higher level caps. Okay, let's get started. My international journey begins by heading to the airport from my home in Brookline, Massachusetts. I haven't played Pokémon Go in a long time, but I remember the summer of 2016 all too well. I know it's long gone, and that magic's not here no more, but I'm hoping that this run will capture just a fraction of the utopian feeling from that summer. My very first encounter is a Cranidos. There was actually a fossil week going on at the time, so there were a good amount of these little demons running all over the place. I named Cranidos Brookline. He has a pretty solid naive nature. Cranidos and Rampardos have disgusting physical attack stats at the expense of literally everything else, so any boost to their abysmal speed is greatly appreciated. From Brookline, we head to the Boston airport, where I encounter a classic Bostonian. Technically, Logan Airport is in Chelsea, at least according to the location tag in Pokémon Go, so that's what I named Grimer. But Chelsea will be relatively useless for the first part of the game, which consists of Brookline just steamrolling his way through the first 2 gyms. So early in the game, a 125 base attack stat just demolishes everything, despite Brookline's admittedly abysmal level up moveset. And since Cheren and Roxy use normal and poison types respectively, they don't stand a chance against the barrage of headbutts from our headbutt Pokemon. It's actually super weird that Cranidos and Rampardos are the headbutt Pokemon. Not the headbutt Pokemon, the headbutt Pokemon. Anyways, there's no need to dwell on these early game sweeps from Face-Ass, so let's just move on. After convincing Roxy's dad to give up on his dreams of being a movie star, I'm ferried off to Castelia City, which will be the stand-in for the beautiful city of Reykjavik, Iceland, the first stop on my vacation. Personally, I didn't take a boat to Iceland, but whatever. From the city of Reykjavik, I catch a Voltorb who gives our team some much-needed speed. We were only in Iceland for a few days, but I did get to travel to a handful of other places in the southern part of Iceland, including the Blue Lagoon, which is in this place, where I catch a Zigzagoon. This city/town/province is too long for a nickname, so I'll just go with Grindavik. With a few levels, she soon evolves into a Lanoon. I'm not sure if I've ever used a Lanoon outside of Pokemon Emerald, so this should be fun. There's one more Icelandic encounter, but it doesn't really seem right to get it from the Castelia sewers, which is the only other route that I have access to at this point. So for now, it's time to fight Berg in his creepy cocoon room where he definitely doesn't do psychedelics. He leads with Dwebble, so I lead with Reykjavik, who's able to outspeed and hit a charge beam, which misses. Not a great start, but that's okay. Dwebble gets off a rock polish, meaning he outspeeds on the next turn and hits a soft feint attack, which is even softer thanks to Reykjavik's Eviolite. We also connect with a follow-up charge beam, which gives Reykjavik a boost to their special attack. Dwebble then just goes for another weak feint attack, and then falls to a now +1 boosted charge beam. This brings in Carablast, one of the Pokemon added to Berg's team in challenge mode. Another charge beam puts Carablast in the yellow, and then he retaliates with a headbutt that crits, though Reykjavik does manage to survive. I'm not really feeling like gambling on a 90% accurate move, because I've been burned way too many times in the past. So I just switch out to Brookline as Carablast attempts an Endure. He then endures again, so our headbutt leaves him with 1 HP. Berg heals, meaning that another headbutt barely misses out on the kill. Carablast then tries to go for another Endure, but it fails, meaning that we're able to take him down with 1 more return. This brings in Leavanny, who's obviously pretty scary for our rock type. So I bring in Chelsea. Razor Leaf still does decent damage for being not very effective, but Leftovers does heal back a bit of HP. Leavanny also knows Grass Whistle, which connects despite its shoddy accuracy. At the very least, we're able to wake up after a few turns of snoozing while being battered by relatively soft aerial aces. This lets Chelsea hit him with a hard Sludge Bomb that activates a Citrus Berry. Leavanny then generously misses the next Grass Whistle, so we get off a second Sludge Bomb for free. But then Leavanny goes 2 for 3 and does connect on the third Grass Whistle. So I switch out to Grindavik, who tanks an aerial ace. She then easily outspeeds and finishes off Stingmon with a headbutt. This just leaves Shelmet, but Grindavik is able to easily beat him down with some more headbutts as he just tries to set up with Curse. Because of the defense boosts from Curse, it does take one more turn than it should, but Grindavik was never in any real trouble here. That gets us the third gym badge. From here, it's off to Nimbasa City, where I decide to get my final Icelandic encounter. On our last day in Iceland, we drove the Golden Circle, a popular route through southern Iceland with a bunch of different stops along the way, including a beautiful national park as well as a collection of active geothermal geysers. The final destination on our Golden Circle tour was the massive roaring waterfall Gullfoss. More important than this random waterfall, though, was a nearby cafe that had Wi-Fi, meaning that I was able to successfully load up Pokémon Go and catch a Torchic. The location tag in Pokémon Go for this Torchic was even longer than the one for Zigzagoon, so I end up just naming him Blaskogob. He would have been pretty useful in Berg, huh? Fortunately, we still made it through in one piece, meaning that now it's time for Elisa. Though conveniently, 4 of our 5 Pokémon can learn Dig, including Blaskogob, who has evolved into a Combuskin, and Brookline, who has evolved into Rampardos. Fun fact, Rampardos has the highest attack stat of any non-legendary, non-mega Pokémon. If only he was even just slightly faster. But speed's no problem for Reykjavik, who has evolved into an Electrode, making them one of the fastest Pokémon in the game. If only I could fuse Reykjavik and Brookline into one mega powerful, ultra speedy, unstoppable Pokémon, I'd call him Rampartrode, and he would be beautiful. Anyways, the fight with Elisa ends up being almost a one-man show. She leads with Emolga, and I lead with Brookline. Now that I've picked up the TM for Rock Tomb, he finally has a Rock-type stab move, albeit an inaccurate one. Not that there's any other kind. After Emolga Volt switches into Joltik, our first Rock Tomb flattens her like an itty-bitty pancake. Brookline's Leftovers also recovers a little bit of HP. Flaffy comes in second, so we outspeed and go for a Dig. Dig has great synergy with Leftovers because by the time Elisa's little lamb goes down, we've actually restored a good chunk of our HP. Fortunately, we also managed to avoid Flaffy's static ability. Emolga comes back in, so I decide to go for a bold prediction. The Flying Squirrel goes for another Volt Switch and brings in Zebstrika as Brookline goes for a Dig. So on the next turn, after the Tiny Horse misses a Pursuit, she goes down in one shot. This just leaves round 3 with Emolga. Brookline then tanks a third Volt Switch that no longer causes Emolga to switch because all her friends are dead. Then we miss a Rock Tomb, which is to be expected. So I switch to Reykjavik, who tanks a weak Volt Switch. Then we just trade off attacks for a few turns. The little rat can't do anything to Reykjavik, and her secondary flying type is doing her no favors. 2 moves is all it takes to snipe the Flying Squirrel out of the sky, winning us the battle. So far, these gym battles have been relative cakewalks, but as you might have already noticed, 4 of my 5 Pokémon share a ground-type weakness, meaning that the already difficult fight against Clay becomes this challenge's first major obstacle. No amount of funky Driftvale City music can mask the anxiety I have for this battle. Fortunately, in challenge mode, the level cap for Clay is 36, meaning that Blaskogob can fully evolve into Blaziken, and with the help of move tutors, he can learn Fire Punch, which should give us a solid answer into Clay's scariest Pokemon, Excadrill. The game also gives you an air balloon right before this gym, so with some careful maneuvering, things should be okay. Plus, at the expense of some sweet red shards, many of our Pokemon can actually learn some pretty useful move tutor moves. For example, I lead Reykjavik into Clay's Krokorok. Thanks to his Dark type, we're able to one-shot him with a super effective Signal Beam boosted by a held Expert Belt. I was expecting Clay to bring in Sandslash next, but he actually brings in Onix because the base power of Explosion is more than the base power of super effective Bulldoze. I assume that Onix will go for Bulldoze here, so I switch to Blaskogob, who's holding an air balloon, but Onix just goes for Rock Polish. So I bring in Grindavik, who fortunately dodges a Rock Slide on the switch. But Onyx makes up for that by landing a critical hit on the next turn, though at least it doesn't flinch. So Grindavik nails him with a Seed Bomb that brings him down to his sturdy. Clay uses his 1 Hyper Potion here, so another Seed Bomb brings Onyx back down to 1 HP. But now we have a bit of an issue. The AI loves to explode when they're low on HP. So if Onyx explodes here, Grindavik is going down. I could switch to Brookline, who will resist the explosion, but he's then at risk to a Bulldoze if Onyx goes for that instead. Since Onyx has such crap attack, I decide to switch to Brookline, who should survive a Bulldoze as long as he doesn't crit. He ends up just getting hit by a pretty soft Rock Slide though. And then on the next turn, the big Rock Snake does go boom, but it does just about 25%. Poor Onyx. Such a terrible Pokemon. Sandslash comes in third for Clay, and he threatens with a Bulldoze, so I again go to Blastogob, who's immune to the Bulldoze. And now I have another problem. According to my calcs, Sandslash is bulky enough to tank 2 Fire Punches, meaning that he'll be able to break Blaskogob's Air Balloon on the first turn, and then hit him with a Bulldoze on the second. Even if the Bulldoze didn't kill our anthropomorphic chicken, and he was able to kill Sandslash, with the speed drop from Bulldoze, Blastogob wouldn't be fast enough to outspeed Clay's Excadrill, who could then kill us before we get off an attack. So, for that reason, I switched to Chelsea, who I know can tank 1 non-critical hit Bulldoze. But Sandslash just goes for Hone Claws, which is pretty bad. I try to predict that he will now go for Bulldoze, but he just goes for a second Hone Claws, meaning that Chelsea's Disable is relatively useless. I'm really butchering these AI predictions this battle. I decide to switch back to Blastogob, hopefully on a Bulldoze, but Sandslash just uses Rock Slide instead, meaning that Blaskogob's Air Balloon pops. At this point, it's super clear that at least one of my Pokemon has to go down, and I really need to start doing some damage to this guy. So I just have Blastogob hit Sandslash with a Fire Punch, which ends up doing well over 50%, meaning that it would have been completely safe to stay in and take Sandslash out with 2 shots. So losing Blastogob here is a massive misplay, and a classic case of me overcomplicating something that should have been super straightforward. In my defense, I have no idea what the IVs and natures of this Sandslash are. I only have trainer docs for a few trainers in normal mode of Black 2 and White 2, and it isn't unreasonable to expect the natures and IVs to be different between normal and challenge mode. So I was doing my calculations under the assumption that Sandslash has perfect IVs, when this appears to very much not be the case. I can't be too upset about that misplay though, because I just didn't know. On that note, if someone does have trainer docs for Black 2 and White 2 challenge mode, hit me up. Well, Brookline is able to revenge kill the low IV'd Sandslash using an Iron Head, so that just leaves Clay's Excadrill. And since Excadrill doesn't have max IVs either, and we roided up Brookline with speed EVs, we're actually able to outspeed the mole and kill him with a single dig, winning us the battle. But boy does it feel bad to have to bury Chicken Man, especially so soon after bringing him on board. Rest well, Blastogob. Though we may be down 1 Birdman, my pile of sludge evolves into a bigger pile of sludge, so at least I have that going for me. It's also a pretty quick turnaround to the 6th gym leader Skyla, who marks the end of the Icelandic part of my journey. She leads with Swoobat, and I lead with Reykjavik, who is able to outspeed and kill the bat with a single Electro Ball. This conveniently brings in Swanna next, so she too goes down to a single ×4 effective Electro Ball. Third is Skyla's Sigilyph, who actually manages to survive an Electro Ball with a Sliver, which lets her get off a pretty annoying Hypnosis. So I switch to Grindavik as Skyla uses a Hyper Potion. Then we hit this weirdo with a Return as she misses a second Hypnosis. So one more return finishes off what could have been an incredibly obnoxious Pokemon to deal with. Last is Skarmory, so I switch out to Chelsea as Skarmory sets up an Agility. I neglected to teach Chelsea Thunder or Fire Punch, so we're stuck with Ice Punch, which does decent damage into Skarmory, but she's also doing solid damage with Steel Wing even after Leftovers recovery. So I just switch out to my Sleeping Orb, who easily tanks a Steel Wing. We also still outspeed Skarmory, so she wastes a turn setting up another Agility. Then, after tanking a slightly stronger X-Scissor, Reykjavik wakes up and hits Skarmory with an Electro Ball that leaves her with a Sliver and activates a Citrus Berry. So we just have to tank one more X-Scissor, which actually crits, and then a final Electro Ball seals the deal and wins us the battle. That was a bit sloppier than I was expecting, but that's okay. With 6 gym badges, it's time to say goodbye to Iceland and head off to my second home country, Finland. We spent about a week in the land of 1,000 lakes, mainly visiting family that I hadn't seen in about 3 years. So I didn't do a ton of traveling within Finland itself, but as soon as we landed in the Helsinki airport, I made sure to open up Pokémon Go and catch Lord Helix herself. Now technically the Helsinki airport is in Vantaa, so that's what I name Ammonite. It also means that I could have gotten another encounter in Helsinki proper at some point during the 2 full days that we spent there, but I forgot. So my next encounter is a Swablu from Hämeenlinna, the city north of Helsinki that my family lives in. Of course, Hämeenlinna is too long of a nickname for Swablu, so I just name him Häme. And then finally, when visiting a cousin in Pirkala, I catch a Natu, who as with Vantaa and Häme before him, is able to fully evolve pretty soon after I catch him. These flying types would have been super useful into clay, but there are a few pretty tricky fights coming up against Pokemon with Earthquake, so better late than never. That's all the encounters I'll get for this challenge though, so these 7 Pokemon will need to carry me throughout the rest of this run. Nothing super notable happens before it's time to face Drayden for badge number 7. I really cannot stress how much time I spent preparing for this fight. I came up with and shot down so many different strategies, desperately trying to figure out how to deal with his super bulky Dredagon, his speedy Flygon, his singing Altaria, and of course his absolutely terrifying dragon dancing Haxorus. So imagine my surprise when I finally figure out that by far the best strategy is to sweep with Dragon Pulses from Häme. I guess I just grossly underestimated Altaria. Or grossly overestimated Drayden. I don't know. Again, I'm not 100% confident on the IVs or natures of these Pokemon, so it's pretty likely that this Dragon Pulse sweep was risking some low rolls into crits, but that didn't happen. Long live Häme, objectively the best Dragon-type Pokemon. Time to rebrand as Altaria HG. Before the bulk of the late game story stuff kicks off here, we have to quickly take care of the 8th and final gym leader, Marlin. So it's time to try another Reykjavik sweep, which hopefully goes a little more smoothly than last time. Marlin leads with his Wailord, so we go for a Magnet Rise to prevent him from taking us down with an Earthquake. Then I use Charge Beam, which leaves the giant fish in the red and also gets us a special attack boost. Wailord then just uses a Rain Dance, which sets up the rain. Marlin uses a Hyper Potion on the next turn, but a second Charge Beam, which is now boosted, takes him out in one shot, and gets us a second special defense boost. This brings in Mantine, who either doesn't have Swift Swim or still gets outsped by Reykjavik, because he falls to a +2 perfectly accurate Thunder before he can get off an attack. So, third is Caracosta. An Electro Ball activates his Sturdy and his Citrus Berry as he retaliates with a Scald, which thanks to the rain does a decent amount of damage. A crit into a burn looks like it might have actually killed Reykjavik. No matter though, a second Electro Ball takes out Marlin's prehistoric turtle. So that just leaves Jellicent. The rain is gone, so I gotta just hope that a +2 Electro Ball is enough for the kill. But I never doubted Reykjavik. Jellicent falls, winning us the battle and putting us squarely in the endgame. But that means it's now time for about a dozen mini-boss fights before we get to face the Elite Four. Some of these are actually pretty challenging, especially in a playthrough like this where I have such a limited number of Pokemon at my disposal. The first one that is notably difficult is the final fight against Colress. Many of his Pokemon are pretty scary at this point. One of which is his lead Magneton, who is holding an Eviolite and has the ability Sturdy. Fortunately, I can lead with Brookline, whose ability Mold Breaker is finally useful, because it means that he can ignore Sturdy and take out Magneton with a single Bulldoze. This brings in Metang, but they too go down to a single Fire Punch. Third is Beheeyem, who threatens with an Energy Ball, so for now, Brookline's job is done. I switch to Pirkala, who brushes off a resisted Energy Ball. Then we nail one of my least favorite Pokemon with a super effective Shadow Ball before tanking a follow-up Psychic. Colress heals with a full restore here as I set up a Wish. So on the next turn, after I hit another Shadow Ball, and Beheeyem lands another Psychic, Pirkala's wish comes true, meaning that we're able to finish off Beheeyem at almost full HP on the following turn. Fourth is Magnezone, who is a pretty strong special attacker and also has Explosion, so I do need to be a little careful here. I start by switching to Reykjavik on a resisted discharge. Then I go for a Volt Switch for some chip and bring in Chelsea, who gets hit by a Thunder Wave, which makes this a little more annoying. Magnezone then hits a Flash Cannon, and we get fully paralyzed, though some Black Sludge recovers a bit of HP. I decide to switch back out to Reykjavik, who shrugs off another discharge, and also manages to avoid the paralysis. Then I go for another Volt Switch, which should do enough damage to put Magnezone in range of a single Fire Punch from Chelsea, who again comes in on a Thunder Wave. An Explosion from Magnezone only does about 50%, so as long as they don't crit, Chelsea is pretty safe here. But Magnezone ends up just going for a Discharge, and then Chelsea gets fully paralyzed again. So, Magnezone now uses Explosion, which gets a critical hit. I'm not gonna lie, that death really pissed me off, but that's just part of the game. Rest well, Chelsea. We'll ship your ashes up to Boston. As Colress brings in his last Pokemon, I bring in Vanta. Thanks to her Shell Armor ability, she can't be crit, so it's completely safe to nail this bundle of gears with a Surf to pop their Air Balloon as they use Shift Gear, and then tank a Thunderbolt and finish them off with an Earth Power. So the battle's won, but I'm now down to just 6 remaining Pokemon. If one more falls, I won't have a full party left. And I'm not really loving how the matchup into Ghetsis looks, which is always a pretty tricky fight since so many of Ghetsis' Pokemon are quite powerful. Not to mention the fact that we have to first deal with the mutant Kyurem he's created. It's unclear to me whether this legendary Pokemon is a wild Pokemon and therefore has random AI, or if they're technically controlled by Ghetsis and therefore do not have random AI. Either way, I decide that my best bet is to fight fire with fire, or more specifically to fight dragon with dragon. So I lead with Heme. I mean, he's already felled 3 dragons, so what's one more? Sure, this one is a horrifying, monstrous legendary, but he'll only go down if this beast uses Dragon Breath and gets a critical hit. Heme is able to outspeed, and a Dragon Pulse leaves Kyurem in the yellow. Then Kyurem does use Dragon Breath, but Heme survives. That was close. Kyurem falls to one more Dragon Pulse, and Heme yet again asserts his dominion over all dragons. So, like the pouty little baby he is, Ghetsis gets upset that we were able to so handily defeat Kyurem, and he comes at us with his full team of 6, starting first with his Kofagrigus. But Heme is specifically prepared to handle this cursed mummy. He starts with a Toxic, which connects as Kofagrigus just goes for a fairly weak Shadow Ball. Then I go for a Roost, and Kofagrigus gets Vindictive with a Toxic of his own. The idea here is to try and kill Kofagrigus as close to full HP as possible. Heme knows Refresh and has Nature Cure, so dealing with the poison is actually pretty trivial. Especially because Heme just kills Kofagrigus on the next turn with a critical hit Dragon Pulse. That makes things way easier. But I really shouldn't have expected anything less from the King of the Dragons. Speaking of dragons, this brings in Hydreigon, so we do actually need to switch here. I bring in Vanta, who's able to moderately wall Ghetsis' physical life orb Hydreigon with a combination of Leftovers Recovery and using Protect. It also helps that Dragon Rush has pretty lousy accuracy, meaning that Vanta is able to get off a very strong Ice Beam basically for free. This puts Hydreigon in the red, so Ghetsis uses a full restore. I take this opportunity to hit Hydreigon with a Tickle, which is a really weird move for this Pokemon to know. But paired with Shell Armor, it's pretty great. Now Hydreigon is doing way less damage with the Dragon Rushes that he manages to connect with. This lets Vanta pretty easily take out Hydreigon after a few more turns, all the while staying basically at full HP. It also helps that Ghetsis' Hydreigon appears to have particularly bad eyesight. So third is Seismitoad. I protect to get that last little bit of Leftovers Recovery because I would hate myself if I somehow lost Vanta to not having that single hit point. Unlikely, but you never know. Then I switch to Pirkala, who is immune to Earthquake. He's also able to one-shot Seismitoad with a Giga Drain on the following turn. This brings in Electros, who will use either Thunderbolt or Crunch. Either way, it's relatively safe to switch to Brookline, who shakes off a Thunderbolt surprisingly well. It looks like even a crit would have just barely been okay there. Since Moldbreaker ignores Electros' Levitate, Brookline is now able to kill him with a single Dig. This brings in Drapion 5th, who threatens with Earthquake, so Dig is obviously no good. So instead, I take the safe switch to Heme. Then a strong Dragon Pulse puts Drapion in the red before he retaliates with a Night Slash that even with a sniper-boosted crit would have just missed out on the kill. With a second Dragon Pulse, we take out the Giant Scorpion, leaving Ghetsis with his final Pokemon Toxicroak. He tries to go for a priority Sucker Punch, but I read him like a book and get off a free Roost. This lets me safely stay in and hit Toxicroak with a Dragon Pulse, which crits, putting the Toad in an early grave and winning us one of the hardest fights in the game. And to think that we only had to risk like one critical hit. That wraps up the Getsis family drama, so we can finally make our way to the Pokemon League. Victory Road is always a bit treacherous in Unova. There's a handful of pretty tricky mandatory trainers that can be really tough without proper encounters, but I'm prepared for them, so there's no issues there. All that's left is the final fight against my rival, who I tend to largely ignore in Black 2 and White 2 playthroughs, since you don't really fight him too many times, and he's usually just there to complain about his sister's cat. But let's give Mr. Pooh some closure, yeah? He leads with Unfezant, and I lead with Reykjavik, who immediately snipes the ugly chicken with a single Electro Ball. This brings in Bouffalant. The scary thing here is that he has Earthquake and Head Charge, which have some overlapping damage rolls. I use Volt Switch for a good chunk of damage and switch to Hame. Thankfully, Bouffalant uses Earthquake because a critical hit Head Charge would have been really bad. From here, I switch to Brookline, who takes a huge chunk of damage from Head Charge, which does some recoil damage into Bouffalant. Then I switch back to Hame, again on an Earthquake. I'm not confident that a Dragon Pulse will kill yet, so I switch again, this time to Vanta, for a little more Head Charge recoil. I obviously make sure to protect for some leftovers recovery on Vanta, and to guarantee that Bouffalant is indeed again going for Earthquake. So it's back to Hame on the Earthquake. Then it's one more switch to Vanta. Maybe this is overkill. Again, not knowing the exact IVs and natures for this Bouffalant is really rough. But at long last, Hame comes in on one final Earthquake and kills Bouffalant with a Dragon Pulse. This brings in Mr. Pooh's Samurott, who has Ice Beam. So I switch to Reykjavik, who tanks the hit reasonably well. Then I hit Samurott with a Volt Switch, which barely doesn't kill. So now Samurott is in Torrent range, meaning that whatever comes in will get hit pretty hard. I decide to switch in Hame, but then Samurott just goes for a very weak Revenge. Whatever. Mr. Pooh uses a Max Potion next, so a Dragon Pulse does a little bit over half health. I'm worried that a low roll from Dragon Pulse won't kill here, and then Samurott will be able to kill Hame with an Ice Beam. It's really hard to tell. But I figure that since Reykjavik survives even a critical hit Ice Beam here, it's safer to just switch them in. Though that's only assuming that Reykjavik does not get freaking frozen by an Ice Beam. So that sucks. But I can still switch to Pirkala, who can tank a Surf and then kill Samurott with a Giga Drain. Unless the Surf crits. I'm not sure if this death pissed me off more or less than Chelsea's death. Probably a little bit less, because getting crit by explosion feels like it should be illegal, but it's never particularly fun to lose a Pokemon to the final fight before the Elite Four. So this one stings as well. In all likelihood, it was probably perfectly safe to stay in with Hame and go for the kill with Dragon Pulse, but misplays are just part of the game. The most tragic part about this is that since Xatu can see the future, Pirkala knew how this was going to go down. He knew that this journey was going to lead him to his death. And despite that, he still came along and gave everything he had. Pirkala was as selfless as they came. The world could use more selflessness. Thanks for the help, buddy. Grindavik is able to outspeed and revenge kill Mr. Pooh's Samurott with a Seed Bomb, so all that's left after that is his Green Monkey. Beating him does require dodging a critical hit Rock Slide with Hame, but with one final Ice Beam, Simisage falls, and my rival is all flushed out. So, the last thing to do is figure out how to beat the Elite Four and the Champion with my 5 remaining Pokemon. Since we're on Challenge Mode, the Elite Four has 5 Pokemon instead of their usual 4, and they all have powerful held items. Same goes for Iris, so this is probably one of the hardest Elite Fours in any vanilla Pokemon game. We're gonna need to pull out all the stops for this one, including mining some gems and edging all my Pokemon to the level cap of level 62. Let's see if this team has what it takes to close out this international challenge and avenge the deaths of all 3 of their fallen comrades. First is Chantel with her ghost types. She leads with Kofagrigus and I lead with Grindavik. Now, this is an Emerald, so Grindavik can't sweep the entire Elite Four with Belly Drum, but it's at least relatively safe to get one off here. We have a Ross Berry to cure the burn from Kofagrigus' Will-O-Wisp, but she just misses. So a Shadow Claw cleanly kills Kofagrigus on the next turn. Golurk is next, and also goes down to a single Shadow Claw. But before you get too excited about a Belly Drum sweep, or too disappointed, the fun stops here. Because Chantel brings in Chandelure III, who has a Choice Scarf in Challenge Mode. So I gotta switch if I don't want to be roasted alive. I go to Heme, but Fire Blast still does a ton of damage and gets a burn. So I switch to Vanta, who quad resists fire and therefore takes another Fire Blast moderately well. As you might expect, I go for a Protect to get some HP back with leftovers. Then Chandelure hits us with another Fire Blast, which burns again, but then Vanta takes her out with a single Surf. After some net chip from leftovers and burn, Chantel brings out Driftblim, who knows Thunderbolt. So I switch to Reykjavik, who easily tanks it. Then an Electric Gem boosted Thunderbolt kills Driftblim in one shot. That just leaves Bayonet. Reykjavik hits her with a Thunderbolt, bringing her into the red. A Shadow Claw does do a little bit more damage than I was expecting, but fortunately it didn't crit. Chantel heals with a full restore, so Reykjavik fires off a Volt Switch, bringing in Brookline. He then tanks a Priority Sucker Punch and finishes off Bayonet with an Iron Head, winning us the battle. Thanks to the edging, all of my Pokemon are also at level 63 now. Remember, according to my rule set, the level cap ends at the start of the Elite Four. Anyways, next up is Grimsley, who leads with Liepard. So, what better way to counter a Titan than with a God? I protect as Liepard tries to go for Fake Out. Then I start tickling the Mad Titan as she just goes for Night Slashes that will never crit thanks to Shell Armor. The idea here is to lower Liepard's attack low enough that we're able to fully recover the damage from Night Slash with 2 turns of leftovers recovery. After a few turns, I go for a kill with Surf, which causes Liepard to fall. This brings in Crocodile, which is why I need it to be as healthy as possible. Vanta needs to be able to tank an Earthquake, because nothing else can one-shot this Crocodile. Ideally, I could switch to Hame on an Earthquake and kill with an Ice Beam, but Crocodile is just too bulky and threatens with Dragon Claw. So, Vanta just barely holds on from an Earthquake and kills Crocodile with a Surf. That brings in Scrafty third, who is definitely an issue. In hindsight, I think it would have been better to switch between Vanta and Hame to stall Crocodile out of Earthquake PP, because if Vanta had a bit more HP, she'd be able to deal with Scrafty no problem. Instead, I gotta switch to Hame on a Brick Break. Then I switch to Reykjavik on a Crunch, though I was anticipating a Rock Tomb there. Reykjavik goes for a Volt Switch to deal decent damage into Scrafty and bring Hame back out, but Scrafty ends up going for Rock Tomb this turn, which does decent damage and drops our speed. Scrafty also gains back some HP from leftovers, which makes this a bit harder. I decide to go for a Roost on the next turn, as Scrafty goes for a pretty hard Crunch. Then I hit her with a Dragon Gem boosted Dragon Pulse, but she's a little too bulky and survives in the red, letting her retaliate with another Rock Tomb. At -2, Scrafty will outspeed us, Grimsley is gonna heal, and 2 Dragon Pulses won't kill anyways. So I switch to Reykjavik, as Grimsley does indeed use his full restore. Then I go for a Thunderbolt, which does almost exactly 50% before tanking a hard Crunch. The leftovers recovery means that a second Thunderbolt probably won't kill, so I go for a Volt Switch and bring in Grindavik, who survives a Crunch as Scrafty gains back a little bit of HP with leftovers. Then I go for a Seed Bomb, which thankfully does enough damage to finish off Scrafty. The reason I went for Seed Bomb here instead of Return is because Absol comes out next. And since Grindavik is holding a normal gem, a Return is now able to cleanly knock out Grimsley's dog before she can do any damage. So all that's left for Grimsley is Bisharp, who's holding a Quick Claw, meaning that my only play is to hope that I get a little lucky. I first switch to Brookline, who manages to tank a non-critical hit Night Slash. So far, so good. Now, I just gotta pray that Quick Claw doesn't activate and kill my longest living teammate. I click Dig, and thankfully there's no Quick Claw activation, meaning that Brookline outspeeds and one-shots Bisharp, winning us the battle. That was way too close. Third is Caitlyn with her Psychic types. In Challenge mode, she has a Metagross as her ace, so she's no longer the pushover that she normally is. She still leads with Musharna though, so I lead with Reykjavik, who taunts the Sleepy Tapir, preventing her from going for a Hypnosis. This means that it's time for a Charge Beam standoff. The goal here is to get at least 2 special attack boosts before we take out Musharna. Each Charge Beam has a 70% chance of boosting our special attack, so the odds are solid, but obviously not amazing. Fortunately, Reykjavik does indeed get 2 special attack boosts from the 3 Charge Beams that are needed to take out Musharna. From here, plus 2 Magnet boosted Thunderbolts are enough to take out the rest of Caitlyn's team. Again, I'm not totally sure on the IVs and natures of these Pokemon, so it's very possible that some of these one-shots depended on hitting some very risky damage rolls, but I've always been told to never look a Gift Horse in the mouth. The horse in this case being a successful Electrode Sweep, and the mouth being the statistical odds of hitting the damage rolls or something. I don't know. That's Caitlyn defeated. That just leaves Marshall, who is always pretty tough to deal with. He leads with Throw, and I lead with Vanta, which means it's tickling time. And it's just as horrifying as it sounds. By tickling Throw, we're able to drop him all the way down to -6 attack and -6 defense. Eventually, Throw is doing basically nothing to Vanta, who's gaining back all the damage from Leftovers recovery. But Vanta isn't the endgame. I mean, she could be if she bothered to learn Shell Smash before the level cap, but since she doesn't learn that until level 67, it's off to Hame. And from here, I can start setting up Dragon Dances. This is a little risky because it does risk a few critical hits, but as long as Hame stays relatively healthy with Roost, even a critical hit Rock Tomb won't kill him in one shot. And the fact that Rock Tomb has 80% accuracy helps move things along pretty quickly. So it isn't very long before Hame is sitting pretty at +5 attack, meaning that we are now more than capable of killing Throw with an Aerial Ace. Same goes for Marshall's Conkeldurr, who comes out second. Sock is third, and he has Sturdy, so yet again I'm gonna have to dodge a critical hit. This time from Rock Slide. Unless Sock just uses Payback. Nice. Well, Marshall heals here, so it just takes a few more Aerial Aces to bury his second Muppet. Fourth is Lucario, who happens to be a special attacker here. A Psychic crit will kill from this range, so I go for a Roost. Lucario just uses Calm Mind though, but that's perfectly fine because even a crit shouldn't kill Hame from full HP. Not that he gives Lucario the chance to try, because he crits an Aerial Ace for the one-shot. So last is Marshall's Mienshao, who obviously falls to one last Aerial Ace, winning us the battle, and defeating the Elite Four. All that's left now is the fight against Iris, easily one of the strongest champions in the franchise. Her Haxorus alone, with her Focus Sash and tendency to set up Dragon Dance, is enough to easily sweep entire teams if you aren't specifically prepared to face her when she comes out. It means you have to be very careful about which Pokemon you have out at any given time, lest you bait in Haxorus and give her a safe setup before you're ready to take her on. I spent a good deal of time planning out this battle, and brainstorming different strategies that required the least amount of risk. I eventually settled on one that only required dodging a single critical hit. The rest, if played perfectly, I had down to a science. So, with equal parts fear and excitement, just kidding, that's a lie, I had way more fear than excitement, my battle with Iris begins. Iris leads with Hydreigon, and I lead with Reykjavik. So right away, it's time to dodge the critical hit. Reykjavik needs to be able to kill Hydreigon with 2 Signal Beams, meaning that Hydreigon can't crit her Dragon Pulse. Which she never gets off because Reykjavik actually crits Signal Beam and takes out Hydreigon in one fell swoop. I can't believe it. This little Electrode has been an absolute legend throughout this playthrough. Time and time again, they've done everything I've asked and exceeded my expectations. But now, it's time for one last favor. As Iris brings in Aggron, I have Reykjavik hit her with a Thunder Wave, knowing full well that they won't survive the attack coming our way. But then Aggron just uses Automize? So, I guess Reykjavik lives? I mean, the correct play is to let Reykjavik go down so that I can get a safe switch, but there's no reason to think that Aggron won't just go for another Automize here to try and outspeed us. So I take this as a sign from Arceus and hard switch to Vanta. Aggron actually gets fully paralyzed, so we'll never know what she was going for there. From here, I tickle down Aggron to -6 attack, much like what we did against Marshall's Sunbird Muppet. A torturous cocktail of Leftovers recovery, Protect, Rest, Shell Armor, and sudden onset full body paralysis render Aggron completely powerless to the might of my little crustaceous deity. But unlike against Throw, the end goal isn't a -6 attack Aggron. No, this endgame is much, much more painful. After many turns, most of which we can just skip here, Aggron is stalled out of PP on all her attacking moves, forcing her to click that same useless move that spared Reykjavik's life. This lets me safely switch into Grindavik as Aggron unsuccessfully tries to shed more and more weight. And from here, I'm sure you can see the path to victory. Like her Hoennian ancestors before her, Grindavik sets up a belly drum, sacrificing half her HP for +6 attack. And so, with a dig, Grindavik puts Iris's poor Aggron out of her misery. So third for Iris is her Duplo Monstrosity, who quickly falls to a single return. The same goes for Iris's Lapra, who comes out 4th. But then 5th is Haxorus, who still has her Focus Sash intact. So instead of going for return, Reykjavik flings her held Razorfang right into Haxorus's big dumb face, thereby flinching her and breaking her Focus Sash. Now we're safe to knock her out on the next turn with another return. This just leaves Iris's Archeops, who is actually faster than Reykjavik, meaning that we can't stay in here. But Vanta's never met a physical attacker she couldn't go toe-to-toe with, or wing to tentacle with, and Archeops is no different. She brushes off a nasty Stone Edge on the switch, and then, after tanking one last Stone Edge, a single Surf drowns the Feathered Dino, winning us the battle and the run. I gotta say, that run was incredibly stressful. After losing Chelsea and Birkala in the endgame, I was really worried that this run was going to result in yet another wipe. A handful of these most recent challenges that I've done have ended on a bit of a low note, and combined with my current playthrough of Blaze Black 2 Redux, I was feeling like I was in a little bit of a slump. And even though the Elite Four did require a decent amount of luck in this playthrough, I'm really proud of how I played throughout the finale and how I managed to find my outs. Being forced to use only a handful of Pokemon definitely requires thinking outside of the box, even if ultimately some of the answers are as simple as use Belly Drum. No matter how stressful though, this was a ton of fun, and I hope you all enjoyed getting to see me at least attempt to integrate Pokemon Go into one of these Nuzlocke videos. If you want to see me try another Pokemon Go Nuzlocke, let me know in the comments. I guess I'll just have to do more traveling. If you enjoyed watching this playthrough, it'd be great if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. Or don't, I don't know, but I do know that you should follow me on Twitter and Twitch to keep up with streams of my future challenges. You should also subscribe to my highlights channel to get highlights of the challenge I'm currently streaming before it's cut down to a video on the main channel. And be sure to join the Flag on HG community Discord, where you can discuss Nuzlocking and contribute to future challenges. The links are in the description below. Stay tuned for more Nuzlocke videos, and until then, remember to always, always, always play around the critical hit.